Hello and welcome to this video, and this video is going to be called the 20 greatest jazz fusion tunes of all time, and this is part 2. So now we're looking at the top 10. We're going from 10 to 1. You knew that before I said it, and I'm explaining to, and I didn't need to. If you haven't checked out my 20 to 11, please check it out. The criteria which I have judged this is very specific. It isn't really the top 20 greatest fusion tunes of all time. It's the ones that are most brutal, most funky, and where the solos are so flying, the most flying. That's what I've gone for. You know, what we expect from jazz fusion. There's no like Fusak on here. There's no like quiet ballads. You know, there's certain tunes that are definite classics that we could put in the mix. You know, like Tutu by Miles Davis. That's a very important tune, but it's not here because it's not got those elements. So that's how I've picked it. So we're at number 10 now, aren't we? So where were we? So just to give you a recap, on the last video I had Overtime by Noah, Lingus by Snarky Puppy, AFCAT by Wayne Krantz, The Golden Dawn Suite by Al Di Meola, Nyctophobia by the 11th House, Larry Coryell, Spiral Dance by Jan Galbraith, Keith Jarrett. We had Sivad by Miles Davis off Live Evil. We had Sly by Herbie Hancock, Headhunters. We had The Nag by John Scofield off the album Blue Matter. And we had Captain Senor Mouse by Return to Forever. Not the version by Gary Burton and Chick Corea, which is also fantastic, but wouldn't get on this list because it's not brutal. It's not brutal enough. It's got to be brutal to be on this list. And I've got at number 10 one of the most brutal tracks I can think of, and it's by a band and a guitarist that I just have neglected so greatly, right? And it's wrong, I need to, because this is one of my favourite guitarists. I'm pretty sure when I did my favourite guitar solos, he didn't figure on the list, and that was a mistake, because this is one of my favourite guitarists that's ever lived. I think if I was going to say jazz fusion guitar, who just exemplifies everything great about jazz fusion guitar, it would be Scott Henderson. And his band, Tribal Tech, here we go, is like one of the most important jazz fusion bands from the 80s and 90s. They really kept jazz fusion going, and they never, you know, kowtowed to commerciality. They were always really playing it in your face. And so I knew a Tribal Tech track had to be on here, but which one? And I went through so many, and I there was a couple on the Illicit album that I was going to pull out, but it has to be this one, Stellar by Infrared High Particle Neutron Beam, which is also, of course, a joke on the jazz standard Stellar by Starlight, which they play. It's the track before the album. And they're really making a case that they're reimagining jazz in a completely different way. You know, Tribal Tech is somewhere between heavy metal and Weather Reports. So I just had one of my kids trying to. They know not to disturb me when I'm doing this, right? I'm not starting again. I'm too far in this one. Well, 3 minutes. I could start again. Now we'll keep going. You don't mind that, do you? A little bit of a look. The more I talk about it, the worse it gets, isn't it? Right. So, yeah, the Tribal Tech is sort of somewhere between heavy metal and Weather Report. See, that was a good line, and she sport it. And Scott Henderson is somewhere between, I don't know, B.B. King and Alan Holdsworth. He really occupies an incredible space in music. When Tribal Tech go too far towards Weather Report and it just starts to sound like Weather Report, that is something I'm not so keen on. It's not that I don't like it, I'm just like, God, you really sound like Weather Report. I find that they're most interesting when they're traversing that sound in the middle, and on this track they really do. It's got all the kicks and stops and starts of Weather Report, but it's also got some brutal heavy metal riffs. And then when Scott Henderson goes for his solo, they do that Mavish new thing where the band just drops out and it's drums and guitar, and he's just incredible. Go and listen to it, just blows your face off. And then when the band kicks in, he's all over the place, sounds like Holdsworth. And another thing I'm not so keen with Tribal Tech, this is the reason why they don't crop up so much, and I really do like them, but I've just got a couple of niggles. The other thing with Tribal Tech is the 80s keyboard sounds, but by this period, this and the album Thick, I really feel that what's the keyboardist's name? See, this is where this is terrible. Drummers Kirk Covington, Gary Willis on bass, Scott Henderson on guitar, and on keyboards we have Scott Kinsey. How could I forget this incredible player? But I really feel that he goes from having quite dodgy keyboard sounds on the early Trouble Tech albums to actually completely owning keyboard sounds and starting to pull out some incredible things. And that's what you're going to hear. God, I've spent 5 minutes talking about the first track, and we're not going to get through them all if I do that. So what have I got next after Tribal Tech? So this is at number 9. Right. Weather Report off the Black Market album, Herandu. I think Weather Report, a really interesting fusion band. But with this sort of criteria I've got for this is where they're really soloing, really playing. You know, Weather Report don't always do that. They do it on side 2 of I Sing the Body Electric. It's all over tail spinning, and it's also on this album, which is why that makes this my favourite album. Of course, their greatest, most influential album is Heavy Weather, but this is my favourite album. I love the tracks with Narada Michael Walden because I love Narada Michael Walden. Black Market, God, Black Market could nearly make it. Should I put Black Market in? It could well be Black Market, but today. It's Herandu. Herandu is like where they almost like cock a snoot to the Mavish Orchestra. It's like, well, you do odd time signatures. You want to see what happens when we do odd time signatures? And I still can't get my head around it. It's all over the place. And they just really solo. Wayne Shorter can really burn, but he can burn and maintain space in the music as well. Absolutely incredible. So that's what we've got at number 9. Right, so what have I got at number 8? All right. I knew he'd be in here somewhere, and I thought, which is just the most brutal track, which is the most jazz fusiony track he's ever done, which is the one where he really plays. And it's off Shut Up and Play Guitar by Frank Zappa, and it's the opening track off the first disc, 555, which is Mahavishnu intensity as far as I'm concerned. And on that, Vinnie Colaiuta is rewriting the book for drumming. He is like in every parallel metrical modulated time. The track is in 5, but it's broken up, so it's like 2 bars of 5/8 and a bar of 5/4, and he is all over that as well. Zappa is all over it in that really unique way. He solos, which I think is so important for jazz fusion and never gets a mention. You know, we talk about Chick Corea and John McLaughlin and the way they play and the way they change soloing, but Zappa, it's the rock side, and I think it picks up with the way the Grateful Dead approach jazz improvisation, but Zappa just takes it in and creates a new way of improvising. I've talked about this elsewhere, but yeah, the track that I'm going to put forward and I think this track, if I could only pick one Zappa track and that was the only one I was allowed to have, this could well be the one, you know, on the wrong way around. 555 by Frank Zappa. Right, so where are we at now? Right. So I think we're at number 7 now. I think we're at number 7. So they're all laid out, but I lose track of the time. So I talked about this guy in a recent video, and it was a really popular video. We had about 1,000 people looking at it. So I think I touched on a nerve, which is it's the drummer Terry Bozzio. Terry Bozzio is an incredible drummer. And his forays into jazz fusion are few and far between, but the one major one is absolutely incredible. It's this album, and I'm going to put it into my top 10. Skunk Funk, which is on here, on the end of side 1. Skunk Funk is pretty brutal anyway. I think it's on the first Brecker Brothers album, and it's pretty brutal anyway, and it really ushers in a way of playing which has gone on to influence fusion so much. You can hear it in Snarky Puppy. If you got the Brecker Brothers and slowed them down and got them a bit more sort of mellow, they sound like Snarky Puppy, you know, in my opinion. You know, the sort of brass lines and the sort of bebop sort of thing going on, and then open up and the funkiness and the Latin thing going on. But on this album, which is live, they just seem to go off the scale. And I think it's Terry Bozzio. Terry Bozzio is a very vicious drummer. That's what I like about him. When you watch him play on Baby Snakes, he's a very vicious drummer, and he seems to get the Brecker Brothers and just push them to a level, you know. Michael Brecker crops up a couple of times on this and here's his first appearance. So that's what we've got there. So this is at number 6, and it's appearance of Michael Brecker again. This is a track by Billy Cobham. It's off the album Crosswinds. I've pulled Crosswinds out so many times on here, and I was going through the collection trying to find Crosswinds so I could pull it out again, and then I saw this, so I thought I'll show them this instead. Right, so this is the best of Billy Cobham, which I think came out in the late 70s, early 80s. As a kid, when I got into Billy Cobham, I had Crosswinds, I got Spectrum, and then I went and bought this album. And then there was a CBS one that came out as well, and that was sort of my guide through Billy Cobham. It was listed to those, and then buying the albums that were the tracks I really like. And of course, Pleasant Pheasant, here it is on here as well. So I just thought I did that. God, Pleasant Pheasant. God, this is like, what number are we at here? We're at number 6. Oh, this could easily be number 1. You know, this is just one of the greatest tracks ever. It's so funky, it's so out there. It's got one of the great solos by Michael Brecker, which is just, you know, when I'm at college and I talk about soloing, and I go, right, let's listen to a solo, let's listen to someone who can really solo. I play them Michael Brecker on Pleasant Pheasant. Now, Pleasant Pheasant is a blues, that's all it is. It's a 12-bar blues, but the way that these musicians can take that. George Duke's beautiful spacey solo, and then Billy Cobham does a solo through the form, and it's without doubt my favourite drum solo over a form. You know, that's where the band keeps going and the drummer plays within it. It's an old jazz thing that all jazz musicians do, and Cobham just does it majestically on here. The track is so funky, it's so brutal, and it's flying. It fulfills everything that I want from a jazz fusion tune. So that's what we got at number 6. Right. So how are we going to beat that? With this track may well be the shortest track on the list, but in this track they pack in more than I think anyone's ever packed into a whole album. It's just ridiculous, and that is City Nights by Alan Holdsworth, written by Gary Husband, the great Gary Husband, with the incredible Vinnie Colaiuta on drums. Right? Which track? I can't even get my words out to explain how much these tracks now we are talking about mean to me. What track's got the most incredible guitar playing ever on? It's possibly City Nights by Alan Holdsworth. Okay, so what track has got the most incredible drumming on? It's possibly City Nights by Alan Holdsworth. It's just unbelievable what they're doing. How they came across this in the studio, I do not know. Vinnie and Holdsworth together, those two minds together, seem to be accessing an area which other musicians just can't access. And when you put them together, it's just an incredible thing. It's almost like the ideas that they're having are executed instantly. Oh, we want to go there, we'll go there. Oh, you're going there now, we'll go there. It's like that. And then the playing is off the scale. The tune is fantastic. The tune is brilliant, and it's so concise. So that's what I've got at, I think, number 5. So at number 4, we're getting to the big ones now. Number 4. You knew they'd have to crop up here. Only at number 4, Andy. I thought they were going to be at number 1. Yes, I thought so when I came up with this list. But no, if I was really honest with myself, no. So this album, which track is it? It could well be Birds of Fire, but it's not. I think I'm going to go with one word. That was the first time I ever heard funky, brutal and flying, I think. You know, before then I was listening to ELP and Led Zeppelin, and I bought this album, or my mom bought it for me actually. She found a copy of it for me, and I put it on, and I put the wrong side on, so I put side 2 on, and that press roll of one word comes in, and you know, and it builds up, and then the track kicks in, and it's just like, oh my god, what's this? I mean, I've listened to heavy metal, but I've never heard anything as heavy as this. It's like the riffs never end. It's all over the place. And listen to the drum rolls, and listen to this, and then they drop down, and that bass solo comes in. Rick Laird's incredible bass solo, and the whole thing rises up. And then they all fly in, and they're soloing around in a circle, and that circle's getting shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter. And it builds up, and it builds up, and it builds up to an intensity that I never heard in music before. I'm literally looking at the speakers going, what have I got myself into here? Where can they go from here? What can they do? And then bang, stop. And we're into this drum solo. And this drum solo, Cobb uses ostinatos. I'm a drummer. I used to go and do drum clinics and masterclasses, and part of the thing I've done, a whole part of my drumming is based upon ostinatos. Well, I heard Cobb do it here first, and he brings in this sort of clave rhythm, boom, gunk, boom, boom, on the bass drum. Then he solos over the top of that, and you think, what the hell's this? I've never heard a drummer play like this. And it builds up, and then they come back out with this sort of unison, full band playing this tune. What the hell's this? Bang, 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 bang. And then it's like banging this over. It's one of the great moments in my musical life, was hearing one word, right? But what do I have above that? Well, now I'm going to draw upon my favourite album ever. You know how many times I've held this thing up. Visions of the Emerald Beyond. And I'm going to go with Cosmic Strut, because I absolutely love Cosmic Strut, and it does exactly what I'm talking about. Cosmic Strut is a Narada Michael Walden composition, and it's really, really funky, right? It's got some amazing time signatures in, and it's got some amazing runs, but when it gets to the solos, they really fly. And I wanted John Luc Ponty on it, and there were so many Ponty tracks that I nearly put in, you know, off Enigmatic Ocean, Cosmic Messenger. I thought one of those was going to be in. I thought, no, I'll put this in. So I've actually broken my rules slightly, because I was only going to pick one track from one band, but I consider this as being a different band to the first Mavish Orchestra. So that's what I've got at number 3. What have I got at number 2? Right, at number 2, I have A Magical Dog by the Jan Hammer Group. Now, I know when I did my top 10 jazz fusion albums, this was probably the one anomaly. Everyone was going, yeah, Heavy Weather, Headhunters, yeah, Birds of Innomatic Flame, yeah, that's all going to be on the list. Bitches Brew, of course. But when it got to this one, I think this was the one where people went, a lot of people said, oh, you should have put in Enigmatic Ocean. And I think the idea is I kicked this one out. No, this is one of the greatest jazz fusion albums ever made. And as I said in that video, Magical Dog could well be at the top of my list. Well, it's not, it's at number 2. Magical Dog, which is in 11, kicks in with his funky electric piano, and then the band kicks in, and what we've got is something that sounds sort of Indian and funky and classical. You know, Jan Hammer's got this classical thing that's going in, an area that John Luc Ponty also went into, right? The solos comes in, Jan Hammer's solos is flying, then Stephen Kindler comes in on violin, and he's really flying, and you just can't believe where this track's going, and then the track stops. And you go, my God, that was something else. And then it kicks back in again. And it's Jan Hammer and drums. Doing that Coltrane drum thing, doing that McLaughlin thing. I think he's also got sort of Moog bass or Moog bass at the same time. But that moment possibly represents the best of what jazz fusion is. It's that moment. Do you want to hear what jazz fusion does? Right, which is different to jazz and which is different to rock, and it's just in that moment. Jan Hammer, God, what a musician, and we just don't give him enough credit. Just because he's a millionaire, because he had all those hit records, you know, because of Miami Vice, I think it belittles the absolute genius. And the reason why he restructured 80s music and, you know, was such an influence on that with the Miami Vice stuff is because he's a genius. He's a genius. He's beyond jazz fusion. Jan Hammer's a genius. And his genius is really felt on my number 1 track. I had to think about this a lot, and I thought, no, this is the one, and it's undeniably the one. This, I think, is my favourite jazz fusion tune. I think it's the greatest jazz fusion tune, and I'm going to argue why. And it's Off Wired by Jeff Beck, and it's the opening track, Lead Boots. LED, lead, spelt like Led Zeppelin. It's a nod to Led Zeppelin, and I think them taking that fusion, almost like a fusion take on Black Dog, is essentially what jazz fusion is. I haven't talked about Jeff Beck on this channel. Jeff Beck is one of those rare musicians that comes to jazz fusion from the rock side. So you put him with Narada Michael Walden, who is my favourite drummer, playing the best drum part the best drum part ever on Lead Boots, and then stick Jan Hammer in the mix. You know, absolutely at his peak, where he'd really nailed the sound, and what you have is just pure brilliance. Now, this track is probably not as heavy as some of the Miles Davis stuff or the Mavish Orchestra stuff, This is an album that sold millions, and I think this is something that's really important about jazz fusion. It was a way of packaging up high value artistic jazz in a rock context. And Jeff Beck was a genius at doing this. When he heard what the Mavish and Return to Forever were doing, and then he brought out those two albums, Blow by Blow and Wired, they're incredible. Now, as a whole, I don't think Wired surpasses the Mavish Orchestra. That's why that didn't get on the list. But on Lead Boots, especially, that for me personifies everything I love about jazz fusion. Of course, Wired was the big album that got me into jazz fusion. There's a number of albums that got me in there, but I think getting Wired, then checking out those two names, Narada Michael Walden and Jan Hammer, and then pursuing that, and then realising this guy John McLaughlin, and then putting all that together is what took me on the journey. So this number one is very subjective, but I stand by it. If I only could keep one track on my desert island to represent jazz fusion, it would be Lead Boots. Hand on heart, that's the truth. Okay, we're done. I hope you enjoyed this video, and please put your top 10 or top 20 in the comments. If you like it, and subscribe and all that bit, and hopefully I will see you on the next one. Thank you very much.